All right, today we're driving into Tara Westover's absolutely incredible memoir, Educated. Now, if you haven't read it, buckle up. This is the story of a girl born to survivalists way up in the mountains of Idaho. A girl who never, ever set foot in a classroom till she was 17, and then goes on to get a PhD from Cambridge. But here's the thing. This is so much more than a story about school. It's a gut-wrenching look at what knowledge can cost and what it really takes to build a self from the ground up. To really get this story, you have to picture where she came from. Westover starts by painting this picture of her home, Buck's Peak. It's this beautiful, wild, and incredibly isolated place. Her writing is just, wow. She talks about the wheat fields like they're a million ballerinas dancing. This was her entire world, a place so cut off from everything that the school bus just rolls right on by without ever stopping for them. And that's the heart of it, right there. This is a journey from that mountain into the great, wide, complicated world. It's about going from being a kid whose reality is completely shaped by her family to an adult who has to figure out how to build her own mind, even if it means losing everyone and everything she's ever loved. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Because to understand Tara's transformation, you first have to understand the powerful, all-consuming world that she came from. Welcome to Buck's Peak. The center of this world was her father, Gene. And he wasn't just a casual prepper. He was a radical, hardcore survivalist. And I don't mean he just had some extra canned goods. No, for him, this was a religion. He was convinced the end of days was coming any minute. That meant total self-reliance, completely off the grid. And with that came this deep, deep distrust of anything official. We're talking schools, hospitals, the government, all of it, in his mind, was some kind of socialist plot. So what does that actually look like day to day? Well, Tara didn't even have a birth certificate till she was 9 years old. Never went to a doctor, never went to school. Her father ran a dangerous junkyard, and when people got hurt, and they got hurt a lot, burns, deep cuts, concussions, they were treated with her mother's homemade herbal remedies. Life was just this constant cycle of scrapping metal and canning peaches, all getting ready for the end of the world. And layered right on top of all that survivalist stuff was this really rigid belief system about men and women. Her father's word was law, and he believed a woman's place was strictly in the home. They were to be modest, obedient, you get the picture. And this idea, this one belief, is going to become a major battleground in Tara's fight for her own identity. So the big question is, right, how on earth does someone from a world that sees public school as brainwashing end up at one of the top universities in the world? Well, it all started with one tiny crack of light, getting into that closed-off world on the mountain. It was her older brother, Tyler. He was the first one to break away. He actually stood up to their father and went to college. And that just planted an idea in Tara's head. So she secretly buys an ACT prep book and just starts teaching herself math and grammar. Imagine that. At 16 years old, having never taken a real test in her life, she goes and sits for the ACT. She needed a really good score to get into Brigham Young University, and she nailed it. But to give you an idea of just how massive the gap was between her world and the one she was trying to enter, get this. When the test proctor hands her the answer form, Tara has to ask what the pink bubble sheet is. She had literally never seen one before. That tiny moment says everything. She didn't even know the basic mechanics of how school worked. Now, you'd think getting into college would be the happily ever after, right? Well, not even close. For Tara, this was the beginning of the real war. She was now trying to live in two completely different, totally contradictory worlds, and they were about to collide. And the collision was immediate. See, back on Buck's Peak, her father's truths were absolute. The Illuminati were real, doctors were agents of evil. But then she's in a history class, and for the first time in her life, she learns about the Holocaust. She learns about the Civil Rights Movement. The basic fundamental facts of history were in direct opposition to everything she had ever been taught was true. And this leads to such a painful realization. She couldn't have both. She couldn't be a part of both worlds. As she puts it so powerfully, she could either stand with her family or with what she called the Gentiles, the outside world. But there was absolutely no foothold in between. Every new thing she learned was pushing her one step further away from home. Now, this internal battle she's fighting is made so much worse by something happening back home, something much darker, and that's the escalating physical and psychological abuse from her older brother, Sean. This is really the catalyst that forces her to see her family and her reality for what it truly is.
It started out subtly, disguised as a game. But it got worse. So much worse. He'd twist her arm with so much force that her whole body would contort just to escape the pain. In one of the book's most awful scenes, he drags her by her hair, shoves her head in a toilet, and demands she call herself a whore. And the family's response through all this? Denial. They either ignored what was happening or, even worse, they blamed Tara. But then came a turning point. Her brother, Tyler, the one who'd gone to college, he's home, and he sees one of the attacks. He steps in, and he tells Sean, whatever is happening here, it's done. It was the very first time anyone in her family had validated her reality, the first time someone said, yes, this is real.
And what made it all so confusing and so hard to break away from was this classic cycle of abuse. After a terrible, violent outburst, Sean would often show up with an apology and a gift, like a beautiful string of pearls. You can see how that would just mess with your head, right? It kept her trapped, always questioning her own sanity. Okay, so this is where it all leads. This is the climax of the whole story. For Tara, education stopped being about grades or degrees. It became about something way more fundamental. It was about claiming ownership of her own mind. And here's the wild part. While all this chaos and pain is unfolding at home, her academic career is just exploding. She wins a scholarship to study at Cambridge University in England. Then she becomes a visiting fellow at Harvard. I mean, just pause and think about that. The girl who didn't know what a bubble sheet was is now walking the halls of the most famous universities on the planet. But even at Cambridge, she felt like a complete fraud, a total imposter. And then one of her professors says this to her. It's so powerful. He tells her she isn't fool's gold, someone who just looks shiny in the right light. He tells her that the incredible person she is becoming is who she always was. It was just buried. It was her worth. Her identity was hers, and not something her family got to define. And then finally, the confrontation. It all comes to a head. Her father shows up and tells her she's been possessed, that her education is a demon inside of her. And he gives her an ultimatum, a choice. Kneel down and let him give her a blessing to cast out the demon, or be cast out of the family forever. All those years of work, all the pain, all the studying, it had all been to purchase one single privilege. And what was that privilege? The power to self-create. She realized that what education had truly given her wasn't just facts. It was the ability to look at many different ideas and decide for herself what was true. And she knew that if she kneeled, if she gave in to her father, she would lose, in her own incredible words, custody of my own mind. And so she refused. She chose herself. And that's where Westover's story leaves us. It leaves us with this huge, powerful question. For her, an education wasn't just about learning things. It was the tool she had to use to completely rebuild her own reality from the ground up. And it forces all of us to ask, what is the real point of learning? And what are we willing to sacrifice for the freedom to think for ourselves?